Oh, hi there. I was just thinking about how good Undaunted Stalingrad is. You see this? You see this box? Sent to us by publishers Osprey Games? Today we're coming in hot. This box costs £90, and I know what you're gonna think. You're gonna think, £90? What am I buying, Quinns? A washing machine? Damn right you're buying a washing machine. A machine that's gonna wash away all the games you've played before this one, because this might be the greatest World War II board game ever printed. It might also be the best deck building game ever made. And it might also be the strongest campaign box since The King's Dilemma or Oath. Does it have problems? Some. Do I care about those problems? Yes. Should I care about those problems? That's up for debate. So let's get into it. But before we start the review, I just want to say that this is not me cosplaying as a soldier in Stalingrad. It's just very expensive to put the heating on in England right now. And you lose a lot of heat through the eyes. So, if you're not aware of the Undaunted system because you've been living under a rock, and no one under that rock enjoys modern board games, you can watch me talk about it in my first review of this series, Undaunted Normandy. You can also hear about the sequel, Undaunted North Africa, in episodes 115 and 116 of the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast. But for those of you who can't be bothered to do that, because this is the internet and you have the attention span of a stoat, I'll give you a 1-minute refresher on how it works. When you're playing a scenario of Undaunted, you lay out a map and both sides will be given an objective, like race to take and hold this piece of territory, or rush and capture that building currently occupied by enemy soldiers, like taking candy from a baby, a heavily armed baby who's also a Nazi. On the map you've set up, you get these tokens showing your different squads, and like any other war game you've ever played, these squads are going to move around and shoot at one another by rolling dice, and this shooting will be harder if your target is behind cover. However, the method that both players are given to control these squads in Undaunted can be compared to the method that teenagers in Neon Genesis Evangelion are given to control their mechs, in that it is obtuse and beautiful and emotional and harder than it has any right to be, and led to me personally experiencing so many defeats in which I would describe my subsequent options as limited. You see, to issue an order to one of your squads, a player must first draw a soldier from that squad, from their deck, into their hand. While your officers can bolster more soldiers into your deck from this shop containing all your squads, as if you were playing Dominion, except the goriest, saddest game of Dominion ever. Because as your opponent shoots and hits Rifleman A, soldiers from Rifleman A will first get shot out of your hand before you get the chance to play them, and if there aren't any there, then they'll be shot out of your discard pile, and finally your deck. And where do they go when they're shot? Into the grave. God, you can't see anything with these. I don't know why people wear them. Things to know about this system? First off, it is nauseatingly evocative. When your opponent takes a shot, you can hear the crack of a rifle. If they were shooting at someone you were holding in your hand and they missed, you can hear the bullet whizzing over their head. It's also one of the most unyielding puzzles I've encountered in years. I must have played 25 games of Undaunted, and still, when it comes to the first bolster of a match, I'm paralyzed with indecision. When I lose a game after executing a plan that I believed in, like, I don't know, deciding to hang back and try and paralyze my opponent by suppressing them with machine gun fire, trying to figure out why I lost involves having like this post-mortem of the match with my opponent in which we discuss what went wrong and whether it was just bad luck. But maybe most importantly, despite Undaunted giving you all of this machinery to play with in the form of the personal deck that you get to customize, the game remains dazzlingly interactive. Like, despite the fact that your opponent's turns are so terrifying that for my first few missions of Undaunted Stalingrad, the word that Tom and I said most commonly to each other wasn't a word at all, but a kind of mimed throwing up in the mouth sound effect. Through that fingers over your eyes terror, you are still going to be watching every card your opponent plays and every card they add or remove from their deck, because that's the only way you're going to win. Which means Undaunted Stalingrad is a great game to buy if you've got someone in your life you just want to sit with and look at for a really, really long time. Because what makes Undaunted Stalingrad different and 3 times more expensive than previous Undaunted games is a long, grueling, branching campaign. You start with scenario 1, with one player as the Germans and the other as the Russians, scrapping over the central square of the city of Stalingrad, and you're going to be fighting over that city for game after game, after game, after game, after game, after game, after game, for a total of 15 games, unless one of you totally beefs it. And this time, all of those nightmarish decisions you have to make in a game of Undaunted, all of those depressing losses you have to hold to your chest like the hand of a dying friend, all of those soldiers who've been visited by Mr. Bullet while under your care, this time there's a degree of permanence. When you finish every scenario, both players pull a fraction of the casualties they suffered in that game to die forever. They go to the great plastic insert in the sky. And sometimes that means you get replacements that might have small drawbacks, like not being able to walk or not having a gun. And that's when you're lucky. Specialized squads like snipers and tank crews don't have reserves. If they die, the game's just like, yeah, sorry. But also, and this is very cool, after every scenario, you draw a couple of survivors from your deck to become veterans. The bad news is, veterans can be drawn as permanent casualties like everyone else. A consequence so painful that sometimes my opponent and I wouldn't put veterans in our decks. You know what, Bogdan? You just hang back this time. I've got a bad feeling about this operation. What's also cool, even if, as we'll get to, it doesn't quite sing in practice, is that the city of Stalingrad suffers consequences as well. So you might lay out scenario 3, which is just like this bit, and then scenario 4 is this bit and a little over here, and then back to the middle again, meaning you might fight over the same bloody schoolhouse like 3 times, raising the question of whether this whole war thing is good, actually. But also, as big, important buildings get shagged by a variety of heavy explosives, you're going to permanently replace that tile with a more shattered one. And sometimes, one side or the other will get to dig a trench as a special treat. What's also neat is that these scenarios have some serious branching. As each of you wins or loses certain missions, not only will you take control of different areas of the city and unlock or never unlock different cards for your decks, each side gets their own personal storybook, which my Zoomer co-worker describes to me as my German lore. And it's nice as a palate cleanser that between missions you get to read about touching Nazi moments, or that your Soviets are sad. Now, without a shadow of a doubt, this is the best Undaunted box that Osprey Games has released to date, and it definitely justifies its £90 price tag. Not only is this a game that I happily played 15 times in 2 weeks, what's really cool is that unlike a lot of campaign games, there's no stickers or ripping up components or envelopes, so you can reset it totally once you're done. So you can replay it in a few years, or sell it, or give it to a friend, or all three. Sell it to a friend and then in a few years, replay it with them. A technique that I like to call the Devil's Trio. However, I do have a few criticisms. No! How did you know I was filming today? Also, that door was locked. Give me the review! Ah!
Hello, I've forced my way into this section of the review, and I was gonna talk about why Undaunted Stalingrad is so great, but it's obvious why it's so great. It's the Undaunted system with legacy elements, and the Undaunted system is one of the best combat systems in all of games. So rather than focusing in on that side of things, I guess I want to talk about why I enjoyed playing in the Undaunted system for 15 games in a row. I don't find the deck building that interesting in Dominion. I don't find it that interesting in Star Realms. I don't even find it that interesting in Great Western Trail. But the deck building in Undaunted gets me pumped every single time. I think it's to do with these slim decks and their clashes with random chance. The decks are always manageable enough for the minute changes to be felt and enable you to focus 100% of your energy on making decisions. The immediate clashes between what you should do in an abstract sense, but what you want to do because you like to take a chance on those risky probabilities. And what better way to experience this system than putting it in a bunch of different scenarios that are going to test you in different ways every time. You spend the first few missions of the campaign learning the intricacies of this absolutely gorgeous core, and then the rest of the campaign learning to adapt that system to whatever challenges the scenarios throw at you. And every mission enhances that with all kinds of ideas about soldiers being perma-dead and buildings being perma-rubble, but I will say that that's only an enhancement if you're just as invested in this game as an experience as you are with winning. Here's the thing, there's dice rolls aplenty in Undaunted, and now campaign effects that will completely skew the competition on a regular basis. And for me, there is a whole lot of joy in trying to figure out the puzzle now that it's been all scrunched up like that. The systems, the motions are just that enticing to me. And I have a suspicion that the criticisms that Quinns is about to slide your way in reality stem from his competitive streak hitting my fascination with the systems themselves. I'm just happy working out the puzzle. I don't even need the narrative. I actually don't really care about the written narrative that much at all in Undaunted. I just like playing the game. I just like the deck building. It doesn't matter that some things are a little bit weird and unbalanced or not entirely narratively justified. It's just fun. What it boils down to is a difference in taste. When Quinns gets hit in the head with an unexpected trenching tool, he's looking for a narrative justification for why he couldn't have predicted or mitigated against that attack. Whereas when I get hit in the back of the head with an unexpected...
Trying to stop me from doing my criticism. Okay, here's what I think. Undaunted Stalingrad is a 9.5 out of 10 game sat in a 7.5 out of 10 campaign. I do think the campaign is good. It's welcome. It's full of surprises. Look how thick these decks of unlockable cards are. As appealing and tall as two generous slices of cake. But the campaign also made me quite annoyed on a regular basis. Look, is he? Yeah, he's still unconscious. My big problem with Undaunted Stalingrad is the scenario design. Here's what it is. I think the less symmetrical a game of Undaunted is, the greater a risk you have of it just not working for you. Now, most of the scenarios in this book are either like symmetrical or symmetrical enough, but lots more are quite idiosyncratic, with one side not trying to take territory, but like move across the map, or inflict casualties, or destroy a building. But whatever scenario you're playing then also gets more complicated based on what buildings that would otherwise offer vital cover, like just simply aren't there anymore in your campaign. So why is any of this a problem, Quinns? Well, it might not be a problem for you, but for me, it meant that when I sat down to play a scenario, the first and most important question is looking at this combination of like cards the scenario's given us, of tiles that we're playing with, of objectives that we've got. I had to figure out what would help me and what would kill me if I tried to do it. And that question is like really easy to get wrong. And if you get it wrong and realize halfway through the scenario, the treacly deck building system that powers Undaunted means it's really hard to pivot your strategy. For example, one mission which had Tom's Soviet troops hiding from my army in a single building had him nervily declare, "I don't know how I'll win this." Only halfway through that scenario did we both realize at about the same time that my Germans were sat in a killing field. I wasn't on the offensive at all. I was completely on the defensive. Tom had the advantage, and after that, I lost the game in moments. And it turned out that all those decisions I spent 45 minutes fretting over, what card to put in my deck, what action to take with each card, all of them were a farce. And that didn't make me feel good at all. On another mission, Tom had to prevent my German tanks from reaching an objective marker, and he spent, again, about 45 minutes preparing for them. But because he'd started the scenario by misjudging precisely how hard it would be to stop them, I was able to drive those tanks clattering over the finish line with the ease of a teenager returning a shopping trolley. And like, that game wasn't bad, we both enjoyed it okay, but at no point did I feel tense or challenged, and the end of the scenario felt really underwhelming. So like, see what I mean? That's not a 9.5 out of 10 game anymore. Conversely, the final mission, the grand finale, had some special rules that I didn't mind at all, and Tom absolutely hated. So I guess I could summarize our problems as this. Tom and I both still absolutely adore Undaunted. We just didn't love the 6 or 7 missions out of 15 we played that didn't feel like Undaunted. Kind of reminds me of why I preferred Pandemic Legacy Season 1 over the sequel, Season 2. Pandemic is one of the greatest games of all time, but for the sake of this desire to make it play differently, you've got me playing something that isn't Pandemic anymore. And it's not as good. Beyond that, I think this campaign is full of lovely ideas that just don't quite fulfill their potential. Like, I love how this city is fixed and you fight over different slices of it again and again, but the drab, colourless art on these tiles and the lack of anything to orient yourself with, like a river or tiles with special rules, mean after setting up a scenario, Tom and I had no idea where we actually were. Likewise, like the opportunity to go out of your way to shred buildings that your opponent's hiding in is interesting, But the campaign gives you so weak a grasp on how the war for the city is evolving that you never know if flattening an apartment block is a good idea, because in the next scenario, you might start in it. But if I was sad to never fall in love with a building, I was heartbroken to never fall in love with a soldier. Like, that's the heart of Undaunted. It's a game that asks, what if there was a World War II game, but each soldier was a card with a face and a name, and they got shot, and you went, oh, that's quite sad, actually. Now, credit where it's due. At the end of my Undaunted Normandy review, I had a big rant about how, like, World War II wasn't just Americans versus Germans, and the cards in this game do show a greater variety of races and genders, actually. But if you're making an Undaunted campaign, that is a golden opportunity to huff more life and more pathos into these soldiers. Give them quirks as to how they fight. Give them recognizable features in the art so they stick in my head. Let my squad leaders distinguish themselves from one another. Give my tanks the nicknames that the soldiers give them. I'm thinking here about the Edelweiss from bizarre strategy franchise Valkyria Chronicles. A tank that becomes a character in your squad in its own right, and it keeps you safe, and you feel protective over it in turn. Don't call the tanks in your game the KV-1, the T-34, and the T-34-76 mod. I've got a separate nitpick that the tanks in this game just are not scary at all, but like, we've all got places to be. Come on, Quinns. Long story short, after 15 games of holding these same soldiers close to my chest, I did not find love at all. I felt no closer to these lads than I did when I reviewed Undaunted Normandy, and that is just such a missed opportunity. The strongest feeling I had for anybody in this game was real hatred towards the few Soviet riflemen I was fighting against who rolled 2 dice instead of 1, and like, that's not nothing, you know, a nice bit of hatred, but I was so surprised to not feel more for anybody else. And also, I was really quite grumpy that in Stalingrad, the ugliest battle on the ugliest front, one of the ugliest wars in human history, when one of your soldiers becomes a veteran, they just strike a slightly different action pose, as if their reward for distinguished service was a photo shoot. That's not what I want. After a battle, I want them to get a nickname like Thunderman or Sad Stephen, and I want their uniform to be artfully disheveled, and I want them to have a scar, and I want the light to be gone from their eyes.
Oh, what happened?
Oh, I don't know, man. I think you got too excited and passed out.
Right. So, is this the conclusion? Is
Yes.
this getting the recommends badge?
Yeah, of course it's getting the recommends badge. Look, you and I both love Undaunted, right? This is the best Undaunted box yet?
Yes.
The first time in years a game has coaxed me into playing it 15 times.
And we did play it 15 times.
Yeah, and I said this earlier, but it's so nice that you don't destroy or stick or anything, so you can reset the game and play again.
Absolutely. It manages to do so much without needing to be flashy or tricksy. Just a really good, solid, robust system that has you thinking about it even when you're not playing it.
Yeah, I mean, we should flag here that while reviewing this game, Tom and I did get just a bit obsessed.
A little obsessed. I had that time when I was in the shower swearing on my own because I was using the platoon commander card a little bit wrong, and I was thinking about it on my own. Yeah, it was a bit strange.
I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I was lying in bed at night, falling asleep, lights off, and then I woke up, turned the lights on, got my phone to look up the probability of rolling 110 on 4 d10s. Because I knew it had to be lower than 40%. You know what it is? It's 33%.
33%.
I know that now. We need to play the campaign again.
Okay.
But, like, when we started playing the campaign, I pictured myself writing a review calling this the greatest World War II game of all time, and I don't know if it is. I don't know if it stands head and shoulders above, like, Memoir 44 Overlord or Combat Commander, if you're into that kind of thing.
I don't know, man. I think you've got rose-tinted goggles about Memoir 44 Overlord. Like, if one of your units dies in Memoir 44, it's painful. If one of your soldiers dies in Undaunted Stalingrad, it is excruciating.
I'll give you this, right? If Osprey Games were to do another Undaunted campaign box set in some other different horrible front of the war, I think that could be the greatest World War II board game of all time. I just don't know if this is.
I think this is the greatest World War II board game of all time.
You haven't even played Combat Commander.
You don't even like Combat Commander.
That's besides the point. I didn't like it once. Maybe I like it now. I'd need to play it again.
Yeah, all right. Are you going to do a bit now, like in the Undaunted Normandy review, where you talk sort of mournfully into the camera about the horrors of war?
I don't know, man. Like, the thing is, Undaunted Normandy really felt like a step forward in board games portraying the horror of war. And, like, to me, this just feels like an expansion for a deck building game.
Right. You are doing the face right now of the sort of grizzled World War II veteran, though, aren't you? Like the 1,000-yard stare into the distance.
That's just my face.
Oof. Do you want to get Twix?
In Brexit Britain. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for watching. Shut up and sit down video review, everybody. These two tired, wounded review boys.
Sad war men.
We're gonna go and get a war Twix.
A candy.
Candy. Yeah, okay. We'll see you back in a while. We do board game reviews. Sometimes we don't like the games. One of these, we didn't like this one. Maybe you like us being mean, I don't know. Tom, come back!